All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our Aquarium's Online Academy. My name is Talia. I'm from our Education Department, and today we're going to be discussing a little bit about what it takes to build a habitat. And what we mean by that is kind of what it takes to build an exhibit here at the aquarium. So, we're going to be talking a little bit about some of the things it takes, things we want to think about when we're looking into building some homes for our animals here at the aquarium. And that's kind of what a habitat is. A habitat is a home for an animal. We kind of make different homes for them here at the aquarium. So I wanted to start off a little bit by making some observations. Let's take a look at some of our exhibits and see what do we notice about them, and not just focusing on the fun fish friends. So what are some other things in their exhibits, or some other things we need to think about? If you guys are home aquarists, maybe you have a fish tank at home or had fish growing up, what are some of the things we needed to think about in terms of making them sure they have a nice, happy place to live in? And if you have any observations to share, if you're curious about something, if you have any questions, you are welcome to interact with us during this program. If you're watching this live on Friday morning, you are welcome to text in those live questions to the number down below on your screen, 562-286-1838. If you're watching this later, you can still interact with us. You just have to email us instead. So that email address is right down below. It's live@lbaop.org. So if you're watching this later, or if you think you have a question later, you're like, oh man, I really wish I asked Miss Talia that, you're welcome to email those questions in. So let's get started by making some observations about some of our exhibits. We'll kind of start here in Blue Cavern. We might switch over to another exhibit just to get some ideas of what are some of the things we need to think about when we are building habitats, building homes or aquarium exhibits for our animals. So right now we're looking at one of our exhibits called Blue Cavern. And this is an exhibit based off a local dive site off of Catalina Island called Blue Cavern. I see one of our giant sea bass saying hello and good morning to everybody. But again, we don't want to just look at the fish, even though the fish are awesome. And they're definitely a part of this home. We want to try to keep an eye on not just the living things in here, some of the non-living things too. What are some things we need to think about when building a home for our animals? So I notice in this particular exhibit there's lots of rocks. There's definitely some big rocks that we can see in the background. There's also a lot of green stuff in here too. There's a lot of kelp or seaweed in the back there. And you can't really see it in our webcam here, but there's also some kind of gravel or ground on the bottom as well. So that's definitely something we need to think about in terms of putting things in our exhibit so our fish feel a little bit more at home. And just a quick note on that seaweed there, we do have artificial kelp or artificial seaweed, at least in our exhibits at home. Real seaweed grows very quickly. It's also very kind of finicky and hard to take care of, so we've used artificial here. Don't tell the fish. They don't seem to mind. But it would grow really quickly. Kelp grows about 2 feet a day in the right conditions. So if we had real kelp in here and we had the things in place to help keep that well maintained, you'd probably just see a lot of kelp. It would be very hard to see even somebody like our big giant sea bass here who is mugging the camera for you right now. Oh my goodness. All right, let's switch over to a different webcam just to get some more ideas of what are some of the things we need to think about when we're thinking about our exhibit. So I'll drop us into one more exhibit, and then I think I'm going to do an exercise to kind of try to think about building an exhibit together. So I'm going to do some drawing in just a little bit to see if I can think about some things I need to build an exhibit. So I'm going to have my friend Miss Tiffany. Miss Tiffany is helping me out in the studio today. She is not only fielding all your questions to me, but she is changing all the magic behind me here. Okay, so we're in a little bit of a different habitat here. We were in a kelp forest before, but that doesn't look so much like a kelp forest. I'm going to get out of the way. we'll go see if we can make some more observations here. So I noticed this exhibit is a lot more colorful. I'm seeing some greens and some pinks and some oranges in the background there. I'm noticing that we don't have kelp in this exhibit. We have coral instead. So this exhibit is also based off of a real place in the world. This is based off of a dive site called Blue Corner. It's off in a little island called Palau in the South Pacific. And just like we've replicated kelp in our kelp exhibit, we've also replicated coral in our exhibit here. It's made out of plastics and plaster and whatnot. Again, don't tell the fish. They don't seem to mind. But again, a lot easier to maintain. And then the real kelp, or the real coral in this case, gets to stay in an ocean to provide a home for all the animals that need it. And since we're talking about coral, I bet that means the water temperature is going to be a lot different too. So we definitely want to make sure that our animals, their exhibits not only look like home, but they definitely want to feel like home too. And there's a couple of things we can think about when we're trying to address that. And temperature is definitely one of them. If they live in a warm place out in the ocean, we want to make sure they have a warm place here at the aquarium too. Same thing if you lived in a really cold place. If you had a fish that normally is found in places like Alaska, it's pretty cold up there. So we want to make sure that our water temperature is pretty chilly too. So that's some things we need to think about. Hello, Mr. Ray. As we're building some of our exhibits. So I hope you guys have had some time to make some observations and see what we notice about some of our exhibits here. All right, I'm going to go switch over to my Explorer camera over here, and I'm going to see, ooh, maybe we don't have that available on this thing. See if we can switch over. If not, I'm gonna play it by ear. It can take some time to. Ooh, there goes a shark. Make some more observations. Ooh, yay! All right, I think we fixed our technical difficulties. Excuse our delay. Ha! My friend Miss Tiffany is a technological genius! And we fixed it. All right, so this is my little whiteboard here. Here's my hand. Hello. And let's see if we can think about some things when we're building an exhibit. So, first off, I probably need an exhibit or a fish tank or something to put my fish in. So I'm going to draw kind of a little box that's open at the top. And that's going to be my very, very basic exhibit. Kind of one side's a little bit taller than the other. That's okay. I'm going to fix that. There we go. I'll bring it down so you can see it a little bit better. All right. So I have an exhibit. And now I need to add some things to it because it's looking very plain right now. So we need to think about some things that look like the animal's home. So we need kind of something on the bottom for them to hang out in. So I'll add what we call substrate. Sometimes you have gravel or sand at the bottom of an exhibit. So I'm going to add some substrate here. Very nice. Then we obviously need to add some other things to make it look a little bit more like home. So if I was in a kelp forest, maybe I'd add some kelp to my exhibit. Same thing if I was in a coral reef, maybe I'd add some coral instead. And maybe I'll add a rock so that our animal can also have some shelter, some places to hang out in. Okay, so I've added some ground some kind of decorative things to either A, make it look like home, or B, give it some shelter, some places to kind of hang out in. I probably need some water in this exhibit. That would be useful. So I'm going to add some water up at the top here. Might be a little sloshy, but that's okay. All right, so I've added some home for my animals here. I need to add an animal. And so I'm going to draw a little fish friend. Get a happy fish friend because it has a pretty awesome home. I have a very happy fish. Okay, so I've added a fish friend. And now I need to think about kind of like you would have a pet at home if you have a dog or a cat at home. You got to do some things to make sure that they're happy, right? You need to make sure that we feed them, we clean up after them. Same thing with our exhibits here at the aquarium. So if I was going to feed my fish, maybe I have a little can of fish flakes here, and I gave him some food to eat. I need to figure out what to do with the waste of the fish as well. So I need to figure out ways to make sure that my water is nice and clean. And how we do that is we use filters here at the aquarium as well. So I'm going to add kind of a filter to the top of my exhibit here. Sometimes we hide the filters in the backs or in places where it's not quite visible to the public, but it's doing its job and making sure that the water stays nice and clean. So maybe I have kind of a setup in the back here, and then that's kind of what you're seeing when you're looking at our exhibit. So I think we did a pretty good job. I'm actually pretty happy with my fish tank. About thinking about some things we need for our homes for our animals. So let's see. We have some things to make it look like home. We have some water. We have some things to make sure that water is nice and clean. And we have some food to feed our fish. Let's take a little bit more of a closer look at what some of our setups look kind of behind the scenes of our exhibits. Okay. So if you kind of went in the backs of some of our exhibits, these are some of the things that would greet you here. And some of these things are part of those filters. So we have a couple different types of filters that we use to make sure our water is staying nice and clean. It's not just kind of switching the water around, it's cleaning the water as it's going through the process. So the water is coming out of the dirty water is coming out of the exhibit, getting cleaned up, and then the clean water is going back inside. So one of the things that we can use are things like mechanical filters. And that means the water is passing through something and it's kind of straining it or it's filtering it. This is actually one of those types. This is called a foam fractionator if you want to be very, very fancy about it. And basically it's forcing the water into a place that it starts to, I think this is mostly due to pressure, but don't quote me on that. Anyways, it is making the water get really, really frothy and really, really bubbly. And what that's doing is it's pushing all kind of the waste up to the top here, and it's kind of settling up here, and then the rest of the cleaner water is continuing on through our pipes and our processes here. So this is one of our mechanical filters that we have here at the aquarium. Sometimes you can also have it pass through kind of like a big cloth bag or other ways, and that's basically getting the big stuff out of the water. That's getting, like these. So you can have the water coming through this pipe here, kind of coming through this big cloth sock, and then the cleaner water is kind of hanging out. I'm getting too close to my background here. Hanging out down there and continuing through the process of being filtered. So that's one of the ways to get big stuff. Big stuff meaning things like hair, scales, poop, leftover food. Those are some things that are going to help make sure we get that out of the water so the water stays nice and clean. Here are some of the other pipes and whatnot that help them out as well. I noticed another mechanical filter back here. These barrels here, these are filled with sand. And so all the water is passing through the sand, and the sand is, again, helping catch that big stuff in the water. The clean water is continuing on through the pipes into the rest of the filtration process. So mechanical filters are one of the filters that we have here to make sure that our water stays nice and clean. We're also using some chemical filters as well. Sometimes we use things like ozone or different other compounds that we can add into the water to make sure that that's getting kind of the little stuff out of the water. So that would be things like bugs, parasites, organic material that we don't want continuing on into the exhibit. It'll kind of pass through something like that to make sure that those come out of the water as well before the clean water gets back to the exhibit. One of the last types of filters that we use is something called a biological filter. So sometimes we have little towers in our exhibits, and then inside little towers are little tiny plastic balls, and on the little tiny plastic balls live lots of little teeny tiny bacteria, and the bacteria actually helps us. I know a lot of times when we think about bacteria and germs, we're like, ooh, no, that means it's dirty. These are good bacteria, and they actually help keep the water clean by addressing the amounts of ammonia that are in the water. So the ammonia that we get from some fish waste, it's going to take that and turn it into something less harmful. So they're another way that helps us keep our water nice and clean. So filters are definitely a very important part of building our filtration. I also notice in this picture here that there are some sensors as well. So sometimes we're looking at things like temperature. Like temperature. Some of these are temperature. I'm trying to go read. I think some of these are temperature up here. This is probably more flow over here. So we need to think about not only does my water need to be warm, does my water need to be somewhere in between, does my water need to be cold? We're also thinking about how fast is the water coming into the exhibit? We want some sort of flow, right? You don't want everything just being stagnant and still, because that's not going to make sure that it gets clean and gets cycled the way it wants to. But sometimes we need to think about if this animal lives where there's lots of waves, maybe we want to find a way to make waves in our exhibit. So some of our exhibits have things like pumps and other things that can kind of force water through in kind of a little burst to help make some wave action in some of our exhibits. And then same thing with keeping our water hot or cold. As the water is going through our pipes, one of the things that might go through is a chiller. It kind of goes through like almost like a little fridge in a box. And that cools the water down before it gets to its final destination of one of our exhibits. Same thing with our tropical exhibits as well. If we're looking at an exhibit like a coral reef, we're going to be passing that water through a heater. And same idea, it's going to heat up the water before it gets to the exhibit. Thank you. Miss Tiffany says this is a heat exchange. So I'm thinking that cold water is coming in, or not so hot water is coming in one part, and then the hot water is coming through the other part. Very cool. And I think I see some more filters back there too. Very nice. All right. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of pipes kind of hiding in the back of our exhibit. So you can look at all the beautiful, pretty stuff, and then we keep all the stuff that's making the take run kind of hiding in the backs of a lot of our exhibits. So filters, temperatures, flow, that's definitely something that we're going to keep an eye on when we're building our homes here at the aquarium. Another thing we need to think about is light. Ooh, interesting. So if we think about where an animal lives, especially if we're thinking about tropical exhibits, they might live in a very, very sunny place, or somewhere that's a lot more sunnier here than California, at least where we are here in Long Beach. So we want to think about, do we need to change the lighting of the exhibit to be very, very sunny all the time? Or do we need to shift the light depending on different parts of the year, depending on what animals live in our exhibits? Miss Tiffany put up a great picture of one of the tops of our exhibits here. This is the top of one of our biggest exhibits here at the aquarium. And again, if you guys have any questions, if you're curious about anything during our program today, again, you're welcome to text in those questions to 562-286-1838. Happy to answer any questions if you guys are curious about learning a little bit more about building an exhibit, or even just some things you're curious about here at the aquarium. Happy to answer questions this morning. Okay, so this is the top of one of our biggest exhibits here. This is our tropical reef exhibit. It's actually the whole middle of our tropical gallery. Is one big thing that you're looking at from about 5 different windows. Since it is a very sunny tropical place, It's going to get a whole lot of sunshine throughout the year. So we've done a couple things to this exhibit to make sure that it stays pretty sunny for our animals, because sometimes we have cloudy days. We've definitely had some cloudy days recently here at Long Beach. So we want to make sure that even though they're hanging out here in Southern California, it feels like home to them. So, couple things to notice here. One, we have big, giant skylights in our exhibit. So we're getting some natural sunlight coming through. We have one, two, I think we have a third one further back there as well. But not only do we have skylights, get some natural sunshine coming through, it looks really pretty too when it hits the water just right. There's some big halogen lights too, or some big UV lights as well. So there's one above my lovely friends over here. There's one on there. There's a whole string of them there. And there's a whole bunch on the, I'm going to get good at my backwards pointing one of these days right over there as well. So what these big lights are doing is they're helping kind of make sure that the sunlight is the range or the amount that it needs to be throughout the day. So even if we're having a cloudy day here in Long Beach, it's still just as sunny as it would be in a nice warm tropical place. So lighting is definitely something that we need to think about with our exhibits. So not only are we thinking about where do these animals live, what does the lighting kind of look like? Is it different from something here in Long Beach or Southern California? Sometimes we need to think about lighting in terms of the animals as well. So we actually have birds and puffins and things here at the exhibit who change their feathers according to the season. So our puffin exhibit is indoors, so we want to make really sure that we slowly shift and change the lighting in their exhibit so that they can kind of feel those cues, those seasonal cues, to be like, it is summertime, so I'm going to start changing into my summer feathers, or I've noticed the light is different now, and I'm going to be changing into my winter feathers now. So we definitely need to keep a little closer eye on some of our lighting and some of our exhibits, depending on the animals that live inside as well, not just where they live. So yeah, lighting is definitely another thing that we keep an eye on with our exhibits. Oh my goodness. So yeah, there is a lot that goes on with building our habitats here at the aquarium. I want to drop us back into one of our webcams here. I'll let Miss Tiffany surprise me and see where we end up. But I'll take a few more. I'll step on screen while we're checking those out. But we'll talk we have a few more moments left together. So I want to take some time to just address a couple other things to think about when building our habitats. And I'll get some nice visual aids on while I'm doing that. So we mentioned we want their exhibits to look like home. So a lot of times we will base our exhibits off of real places in the world. So sometimes we'll have divers, we'll have some of our team that takes care of our exhibit. We are in our penguin exhibit. Nice. We'll go to those places, take lots of pictures, see what does it look like? What types of animals live there? And especially, what animals are going to be playing well together. So our penguin exhibit here just has one little friend here, but you might notice we have kind of two different areas for them to hang out in. We have kind of a rocky area up here. These guys actually live up on kind of rocky beaches in South America, and then they also have a nice big pool to go swim in as well. So sometimes we need to think about kind of different areas for our animals to be as well. But we definitely want to make sure that the animals we do put together, if we have lots of fish that are hanging out together, or sharks and fish, or big fish and little fish, we want to put friends together here at the aquarium, because we don't want to put prey species and predator species together, because we don't want them to eat each other. That's not going to look very good. So not only are we thinking about kind of what sorts of friends can be in this area, be in this habitat out in the ocean, what sorts of friends are going to be kind of hanging out together well, playing nice together here in a more enclosed area here at the aquarium. So definitely that's something we need to think about when we are thinking about putting those exhibits together, not just looking like the home, feeling like the home, but like who's going to play nice together in that home as well. And then we also just want to make sure that we take care of them. So just like you take care of your dogs and cats at home, we're going to make sure we take really great care of our animals here at the aquarium as they're serving as ambassadors for the friends out in the ocean. So we're going to make sure that they get lots of yummy food to eat. We're going to make sure that they are active, that they're kind of getting their exercise. We're going to make sure that not only are their bodies active, our swings are doing a lot of swimming right now because it is their migration season out in the ocean. So they do a lot of swimming during that time here at the aquarium. We're going to make sure their bodies are active. They're getting their exercise. We want to make sure that their brains are active too. So we will put in things like enrichment. If you saw our program earlier this morning, we talked a little bit about animals playing and animals having enrichment to help keep their minds active. So we'll give them things like toys, puzzles, kind of special things to make sure that their brains are nice and sharp, their bodies are nice and fit, and then they are going to make sure that they get some checkups as well. So just like you go to the doctor or the dentist every year to make sure that your body's nice and healthy, same thing with our animals as well. So they get checkups. Ooh, and this is, I think, some of our friends. Oh, looky! Oh, that's cute. They're getting a little checkup on one of our penguins there. Very nice. So we want to make sure that our animals stay nice and healthy as well. That was definitely some other things we need to think about in addition to building their home. So I hope you had some fun hanging out with me and learning a little bit more about building our exhibits. We talked a lot about a lot of different things we need to think about just when building a home. So hopefully that's giving you a little bit of insight in terms of how we do things here at the aquarium, or maybe even inspired you to maybe look into having a fish tank at home. I had some fish growing up. It was pretty fun. So we talked about a lot of different things. We need to make sure we have a home for them. We need to make sure that it has some stuff in it to look like home. We talked about things like rocks, substrates, shelter, things like coral, kelp, depending on what sort of exhibit we're making for them. We talked about keeping their water nice and clean. We have all those different types of filters to address different parts of the water to make sure that clean water is coming back into that exhibit. Thinking about, does our temperature need to be hot? Does our temperature need to be cold? Our penguins like to live in kind of chillier waters, so their exhibit is nice and cold, which might surprise people when they think about penguins. They think about kind of ice and snow. Our exhibit's outside, but there's no ice and snow there because these guys live in a very similar temperature to what we have here in Southern California. The seasons are a little flip-flopped, but other than that, it's a pretty similar temperature, which is nice. So we want to make sure that we have nice clean water. It's the right temperature. It's the right flow. It's not too fast. It's not too slow, which is also helping keep the water nice and clean. It's lit well. If we need to think about light, we're going to put friends together, and we're going to help make sure that we do a great job taking care of them. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. I hope you guys had fun learning a little bit more about our habitats. Again, if you have any more questions, you're welcome to still ask us those questions. At this point, we just ask that you email us instead. So the email address is right down below on your screen, live at lbaop.org. You are welcome to email in those questions if you have any more. And if there are any teachers watching, you're welcome to text in your student numbers just so we can get a better idea of how many people are watching these programs and how we can help better serve our community. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day. Happy holidays, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye.